Hey everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar on IFR flying in Canada. My name is Adrian Tegler, and I'm a member of the ForeFlight Pilot Support Team. I'm also a Canadian pilot, and I've had the opportunity to fly as a commercial pilot both internationally as well as for a regional airline here in Canada. So today's topics, we're going to look at what's new in ForeFlight, and then we're going to jump right into IFR flying in Canada and take a hands-on approach by looking at a flight from Toronto City Airport to Ottawa. And we're going to go through everything from pre-flight planning to the filing, the departure, our arrival, approach, post-flight, and then we'll end with some Q&A. Before we begin, you can ask questions during the webinar via the GoToWebinar message panel. And we'll respond to as many of those questions as we can, and then we'll also get to more questions during the Q&A at the end. If you do have any audio problems, we recommend joining from a computer and not a mobile device. Also, this session is being recorded and will be accessible at foreflight.com/webinars. So let's take a look at what's new. Enhanced airway details. This is great for all of us instrument-rated pilots. You can now tap on any airway on the aeronautical map to view additional details for it in the map sidebar. This includes direction-specific MEA, MOCA altitudes, and bearing. And when multiple airways exist at the point you tapped, the sidebar allows you to select between them to view the details for each one. Profile view is now supported on iPhone, giving you a side-on view of your route along with terrain, obstacles, and forecast weather on both iPad and iPhone. And this is available with Pro Plus subscriptions and above. Obstacles in 3D. There's now automatic red and yellow highlighting, which allows you to quickly identify potential hazardous obstacles along your route, as well as on your departure and approach, just like these buildings and the stacks that are along the shoreline on the departure or the arrival into Toronto City Airport. And ForeFlight's 3D features are available with Performance Plus subscriptions. All right, let's get into IFR flying in Canada. And today we're going to take a look at a flight from Toronto City Airport to Ottawa, and we're going to go through the whole process from the pre-flight to the filing, departure, arrival, approach, and post-flight. So I always like to start on the airport's page, and here we are using the weather tab just to start getting a sense of the weather that we'll be expecting for today's flight. So some weather considerations for departure, especially when it comes to an instrument flight. I want to think about runway level of service. Freezing level, that's always important for IFR flying when we're going to be in clouds. Runway contamination. Crosswind tailwind limitations, and do you need a takeoff alternate? So what is runway level of service? Well, at controlled airports like the one we're departing from, Toronto City, Billy Bishop Airport, the current visibility reported for the runway you use must be at or above the runway level of service according to the following hierarchy. So number 1, the RVR for the intended runway of use. 2, the reported ground visibility for the airport. Or 3, the pilot observed visibility. So in terms of Toronto City, RVR is not reported, so we're going to not use that one, and we're going to go to number 2. And we do have a METAR with visibility, so we can use that. So in this case, let's take a look at the METAR in ForeFlight. And we've got 9 statute miles, so we've got lots of visibility today. So I don't think it's going to be an issue, but let's take a look just to go through this process anyway. So to find the runway level of service, I'm looking here on the airport diagram, and you can see there's runway 08 and runway 26 listed. There's information that says for authorized air carriers and for all other aircraft. So I'm going to say take a look today at all other aircraft, because this is just a general IFR flight. It's not an airline flight. And for all other aircraft, the runway level of service requires RVR 2600 or half a mile visibility, and that's the same for both runway 08 and runway 26. So we definitely meet that with 9 miles today. But this is good information to know. And if you look at the TAF, actually, the TAF is showing a probability a bit later on for 3/4 mile viz with light snow showers, vertical visibility of 800 feet. So that's actually starting to get a little bit close to our runway level of service. So it's good to know what the level of service is for the runway so that you're prepared if the visibility does drop, that you know that it's not possible, it's not usable for departure. It's good to know that at controlled airports, ATC will not issue you a taxi clearance to a runway that will result in you, the pilot, violating the reduced visibility operations or low visibility operations. So ATC will also advise you if a runway becomes unavailable due to low visibility and offer alternatives if they're available. So it's nice that ATC has your back at controlled airports, and they won't clear you if the visibility is below the level of service. But uncontrolled, that's it's up to the pilot to determine that and not use the runway. All right, freezing level. This is always important in Canada, and when you're flying IFR and planning to go, or possibly go into cloud or spend most of the flight in cloud, it's very important to know what the freezing level is. And also to know if your aircraft has sufficient anti-icing or de-icing equipment. And if it doesn't, then obviously going into cloud that is below the freezing level is not an option because you're going to pick up icing. So a lot of the year, if you're planning to fly in cloud, you do need an aircraft that's able to fly in icing conditions. And so if we look at the wind, the upper winds here on the airport's page in ForeFlight, we can see that the freezing level is right from the surface. So even at 3,000 feet, it's minus 19. So this is a cold day. So any cloud that we get into today is we can expect to pick up some icing because it's those water droplets are super cooled below zero. So as soon as we get the aircraft in there, it's going to start picking it up. All right, runway contamination. So we want to check NOTAMs for the runway surface condition. And here in ForeFlight, looking at the NOTAMs tab, and you can see that runway 0624, and for us, we're planning either runway 08 or 26. All runways at Toronto City here dry, so that's not going to be an issue today, but it's always good to check as we go through our pre-flight process. In terms of runway surface condition and CRFI information, that can be found in the CFS. And the CFS, the full document, is available on the documents page in ForeFlight under the Nav Canada drive. So you can find it in there and look at this information a little bit more closely. Just to give you kind of an example of how serious this is and how crucial it can be, if you had a CRFI reported for the runway at 0.4, this will actually almost double a 2,000 foot dry and factored landing distance for your aircraft, so making it almost 4,000 feet. So if you had an aircraft that had this 2,000 foot dry and factored landing distance and the CRFI is reported at 0.4, you now have a doubled landing distance. So you could depart from Toronto City Airport in this scenario, and then maybe you needed to return due to a technical issue or something wasn't right, and you'd actually be facing a problem where you may have an issue returning because your landing distance is very close to the runway length. In this case, Toronto City Airport is 3,988 feet, and your landing distance with the CRFI would be 3,980. So that's too close. You wouldn't be able to return safely to land at Toronto City Airport. You have to go elsewhere. So knowing your runway contamination and your distances is very important before taking off, to know if you can return and to know what distances to expect on landing. Crosswind and tailwind limitations. So ForeFlight includes helpful headwind, crosswind, and tailwind information for each runway. This is great to just get a quick sense of what's going on. So I can look under the runway tab in ForeFlight and I can see runway 08 and 26. And right away it looks like runway 26 will be the active runway with the headwind. And there's a little bit of crosswind there, and I can see that it's mostly headwind, a bit gusty. And keep in mind as well, if there is a CRFI reported, a runway friction index reported, you do need to use a specific CRFI crosswind limit chart, which is in the CFS, and you can get that in ForeFlight on the documents page again. All right, do you need a takeoff alternate? So this is an important question to ask if you're departing IFR. And so the key is, if the weather at your departure airport is above the takeoff limits, but below the landing limits, you have to have an alternate filed that's within 1 hour flying time of the departure airport. So the scenario could technically be that you are departing from Toronto and the visibility and the minimums are sufficient to legally take off, but they're actually below all the minimums for the approaches to come back into Toronto, the city airport. So in this case, you need to either have a takeoff alternate, or you need to have your alternate that you filed that's within an hour of your departure. So if you selected, for example, an alternate, we're planning to fly to Ottawa, if you selected an alternate that is near Ottawa, and you're flying, we're flying a Cirrus today, it's likely that this alternate is going to be over an hour away if it's in the Ottawa area. So in this case, you need to either change your alternate and have it be within an hour of your departure, or you use a takeoff alternate as well. So you have two alternates. And the takeoff alternate must meet the alternate minima requirements, and we'll go into those. All right, so before we go into more alternate minima, we're going to start planning the route, so we have that set up. I always like to start with the route advisor. So the route advisor is great because it shows the recommended and the recently cleared ATC routes for your planned departure and destination. And it's a great way to plan IFR routing. So you can enter Toronto City Airport and Ottawa, and then tap on the route advisor, and it's going to right away show you what's recommended and what's recently cleared. So I can see that this route here, with the Beaumont 7 departure via Myvok and the Capital 5 arrival into Ottawa, that's been cleared thousands of times. And it's been cleared for altitudes from 5,000 feet up to flight level 270. So that's probably going to be the route that I'm going to want to use. If I file something else, ATC might give it to you, but they may also switch you to this route because this is what's commonly used. And you can tap that and quickly load it into ForeFlight. You can also load your departure and your arrival using the procedure advisor. And this allows you to kind of get a sense of what the departures and what the arrivals are, what's available, and choose accordingly. So the procedure advisor has this nice graphical indication showing your route and in this case here, all the departures that are at the airport. So I can quickly see here, I can see my route departing Toronto, going to Ottawa, and there's one departure that lines up with my route, which is the Beaumont 7. And that's the one that I would use. It fits with my departure. And then looking at arrivals into Ottawa, I can see there's a few arrivals there, but the one that most lines up with my route into Ottawa is a Capital 5. And there it is. So I can select the Capital 5 and load that into my route. All right, so next, the procedure advisor, along with loading your departure and your arrival, if you want to do it that way, or you can load it via the routes button, like we did initially, also provides you with the option to load your approach. But since we don't know exactly what approach we're going to get into Ottawa, and because we don't file our flight plan with the approach, we can leave that for later. So we'll come back to this approach. All right, so continuing, now that we have our route planned on the maps page, I like to go over to the profile view for my route. This is such a powerful tool to be able to see your route from a side view and then add different weather and different overlays to get a great sense of kind of what's happening and what to expect. So the first layer that I'm going to take a look at here is the clouds layer, and this allows you to display forecast clouds along your route, and it's based on the cloud forecast is based on your planned departure time. And right away we can see here that I'll probably be going through cloud on my departure as I climb out of Toronto, and then I'm expecting to go through cloud as I descend into Ottawa. But the cruise portion of the flight is going to be predominantly, hopefully, clear. This is great to kind of get a sense of that, and it shows my selected cruising altitude, which is 9,000 feet. Again, you can zoom in on this view to get a closer look of certain portions of the flight. You can tap and hold on that altitude, bring it up or down, so you can it's really dynamic, and you can plan and change things dynamically in this profile view. It's a really powerful feature. So continuing, I'm going to change the overlay from clouds, and I'm going to move it to icing. So here's now my route and altitude with the forecasted icing. So again, similar to kind of the cloud view, it's showing that out of Toronto there might be a little bit of icing as I climb through those clouds, and then going into Ottawa, again, a little bit more, even a bit more icing expected on the descent there. But hopefully in the cruise, it's mostly clear. And this is great because my aircraft has the icing, anti-icing equipment on it with the Fiki fluid in the Cirrus, which is great. But if I can avoid flying extended periods in icing, that's perfect, because I get to use less of the fluid, and it just prevents any extended buildup of ice. So it's nice to see there that my cruise portion is forecasted to be clear. So moving on, let's take a look at turbulence in the profile view. So you get a sense there of what turbulence to expect along the route. And next, I'm going to change to the airspace overlay in the profile view. And it's good to familiarize yourself with the airspace along your route, and you can do that here. You can zoom in on different areas of the profile to get a look at what different airspace as you depart, or maybe as you arrive into Ottawa. So here's an example. I'm zoomed in now on the profile close to Ottawa, and you can also scroll along as you're zoomed in there. And I'm actually just tapped on the airspace because there was this little zone here that I wanted to take a closer look at, and you can get more information. So it says the dimensions of it, vertical dimensions. It also highlights it right on the map. So it's good to see here that as I come in via Ilago and Demco, that you're pretty close to that CYA that you can see on the Canadian IFR low chart. And again, you're going to be, since you're on an IFR flight, you're going to be in close, you're going to be monitored by your traffic control, and they're going to be keeping you where you need to be. But it's good to be aware of these airspace that are kind of close to you on the approach. All right, I'm also going to check weather. So on the maps page, take a look at the radar for the flight. GFAs, which are available on the imagery page in ForeFlight. And then once I have all my weather items checked and I'm happy, I'm going to move over to the plates page in ForeFlight. And there's a great feature now where you can tap on Add Flight Binder. And ForeFlight knows that you've planned a flight on the maps page, and you can select the flight from maps or on flights if you planned it on the flights page. And ForeFlight will automatically pull in all that information from your route and from the departure and arrival that you planned, and it will put that into a nice binder for your flight. So this is all nicely organized. The procedures are set up in there based on what you planned on the maps page, and you can tap the airport, departure, approach, or miscellaneous buttons to change procedures or to view different procedures here. And it's kind of in a chronological order from departure to arrival. Really nice organized setup there. Allows you to have everything in one place and all ready for your flight. So now that I have those procedures loaded, I'm going to go through them and just kind of familiarize myself with them on the plates page, review my planned departure, my arrival, Annotations are a great tool to highlight your arrival routing, as well as any important restrictions that you may have. So this is the Capital 5 arrival into Ottawa, and you can highlight and make notes to yourself as you need to. Again, you can take a look if there's any restrictions that might apply to you. You can highlight those. Something like this one here, Demco. We've got max 210 knots at 5,000 feet. So that's something that may apply. All right, once I'm happy with all my review on the plates page, I'm going to move back over to the maps page, and I'm ready to send it to flights. So I'm going to tap that Send To button there in the FPL menu, and then select flights. And this is going to move all my planning from the maps page and populate it into a flight on the flights page. And on the flights page, I can now tap on Navlog and view a detailed Navlog for my flight. I have the option to print that or to send it an email to somebody if I need to, but it includes all the information that I need for the flight. Next, I'm going to tap on Briefing and give myself a briefing for the flight. So here's my briefing today for my flight from Toronto to Ottawa, rather. And I really like this PDF briefing. Actually, this, the vertical cross-section chart here, it includes so much key information, and it's so quick to kind of get, once you get used to it, to see what's happening. For example, you can see here there's the icing severity icons. So I can see that in my descent going into Ottawa right away that that is where I can expect some potential icing. So I definitely want to make sure as I descend in the cruise into Ottawa that I have my icing systems all turned on and ready for that. So it shows a nice profile there. It's also showing your wind and it'll show turbulence. It has a bunch of different information here in this chart. And if you're confused by this chart, or if you want to learn more about it, there's a great knowledge base article that you can find on foreflight.com/support, the support section of our website. And the title is How Do I Interpret the Vertical Cross-Section Chart in the graphical PDF briefing. So you can search for that and find it, and it provides lots of key information on using that chart. All right, I'm going to continue going through the briefing, looking at the weather. It'll provide the METARs and TAFs, and then I'm going to get at the bottom of the briefing, it has all the NOTAMs. And I know how much pilots love reading NOTAMs, but this is obviously very important information, so definitely want to read through those NOTAMs. And then once I've briefed myself for the flight, I'm going to move on to selecting an alternate. Now, the flights page provides an alternate advisor, which gives you a list of suggested possible alternate airports based on a number of different criteria. And those are time and fuel requirements to reach the alternate, forecasted weather conditions, the available approach procedures, whether you've previously selected that airport as an alternate on flights with the same destination. And this is a really good guide to get you started. But as always, you want to reference the alternate weather minima requirements in the CapGen. So let's take a look at that. All right, so the alternate advisor listed Montreal as a first suggestion, and that is similar to what I'd be thinking. If I was planning a flight into Ottawa, Montreal comes up as a great option for a possible alternate, just because it's nearby, a lot of facilities, large runways, multiple approaches. So it's probably a good option. So let's look a little bit further and just make sure and see if it is going to be a suitable and a legal alternate today in terms of our weather minima. So here we go. So we've got the CapGen in ForeFlight on the documents page open to the alternate weather minima requirements. And so the first one here is saying that 2 or more usable precision approaches. And Montreal in this case does have 2 or more usable precision approaches to separate suitable runways. So that's the first thing to check. And then we can know that we can use the alternate weather minima of 401. You can also use 200 and a half above the lowest usable height above touchdown, and visibility, whichever is greater. But today I'll be focusing on just the primary, the 401, the 602, the primary weather minimums, and you can take those further and look at the OR option as well when you do your planning. But now that we've confirmed that we have the two or more usable precision approaches, we can use 401. So let's take a look at an example of the TAF. So our planned arrival time is going to be the 13th at 1600 Zulu, and there's the TAF. And so that puts us right in this zone right here, where there's a tempo of 1 statute mile snow, broken at 1500 and overcast at 400. So does this meet the requirements? Does this make Montreal a legal alternate if our arrival time is during this tempo with this weather? And the answer is yes. So it's a legal alternate because it meets the 400 feet and 1 mile alternate weather minima. So it's right at the minima in this case. So it's up to you if you want to use it as an alternate, but it is legal. All right, you also want to know your avionics and what level of service they're approved for. So in this case, even a Garmin 430 WAS has LPV and can fly a precision approach. And you always want to ensure you have the current navigation database, and this is a CAR requirement for IFR flight. All right, so let's look at another example. Maybe you're not comfortable with the weather in the TAF at Montreal. It's a little bit too close to the minimum, so you're looking at another possible alternate, and another airport that's close by is Gatineau. And so let's take a look if Gatineau would be a good alternate. It looks like from the airport diagram, decent length for the runway. We've got runway 27, runway 09. So we want to ask first, can we use the 401? Okay, so are there 2 or more usable precision approaches to separate suitable runways at Gatineau? So looking at the approaches, we've got an RNAV for runway 09 and an RNAV for runway 27, and these are both precision approaches to LPV minima. So can we use does it qualify 2 or more precision approaches, and can we use the 401 criteria for these 2 approaches? Well, no, we can't in this case. And that is because it specifies in the CAPTCHA that it has to be to separate suitable runways. And it actually has to be separate runways. It can't be to 2 approaches to opposite ends of the same runway. So we can't use the 401 in this case, and so we can go down and use the 602, so 600 feet or 2 miles as the minimum weather requirements when there's just one usable precision approach in this case. All right, so now that we've established that, let's take a look at the TAF and see if it meets the alternate weather requirements at Gatineau. So our arrival time is planned for the 13th at 20 Zulu, and that puts us again within the window of this tempo. And the tempo states 3 statute miles visibility, light snow, mist, overcast at 500 feet. So does that meet the minimums or the requirements to be an alternate? No, right? So overcast at 500 feet is below the minimum which we need, which is 600. So 600 feet is the very minimum, so this would not be a legal alternate. So what if what if this was the TAF? So does this meet the requirements? So again, our ETA is a 13th at 20 Zulu, puts us within this tempo window, and the tempo says the visibility is forecasted to be 2.5 statute miles, snow, mist, overcast 900. So does that a legal alternate? Yes. All right, so this meets the requirements. It's the minimum 2 miles, so it's above that, 2.5 miles, and the minimum ceiling is 600 feet, and we have 900 feet, so we're good. That could be a legal alternate. All right, so now that we've established our alternate and we've entered it on the flights page, we're ready to file our flight plan. And so you can do that right from ForeFlight. Once you've confirmed everything's correct, tap on the Proceed to File button on the flights page and then tap on File. And you'll get a notification like this: your flight plan has filed. And your flight plan will be sent to ATC, sent to Nav Canada immediately if your departure time is within 22 hours. And then once ATC acknowledges receipt of the plan, your device will receive a ForeFlight notification. If ATC for some reason does not acknowledge receipt of the flight plan, you will still receive a message on your device saying ForeFlight has not yet received a notification from flight service, indicating that ATC has acknowledged your upcoming flight with the information. So you're going to get notified either way. For more on filing with ForeFlight, both IFR and VFR, there's a really great webinar that was done recently by my colleague Dominic, and that's available on foreflight.com/webinar. So I highly recommend checking that out. It really goes into detail on all the aspects of filing flight plans in Canada with ForeFlight. Okay, so we've now filed our flight plan and we've gone to the aircraft and we've got everything set up and we're getting close to being ready for departure. So I'm going to use the checklist page and run through all the necessary checklists before the flight. I'm also going to pick up my clearance. So you probably call up the tower and you're going to get something like Romeo Lima Quebec. You're cleared to Ottawa via the Beaumont 7 departure vectors DAVC as filed. 9,000 feet, departure frequency 133.4, squawk 4761. And you can copy all that information down on the scratch pad and read it back. I also like to highlight and zoom in on departure information just for easy reference in flight. And this is just personal preference. You might also want to, do something different. Use a split screen view with synthetic vision on the top and the departure procedure overlaid below. Just a note, if you are referencing the departure routing that's loaded via the procedure advisor, if you ever see dashed lines like this on the map, those lines, they represent legs that cannot be fully depicted on the map. So a dashed line is a leg that can't be drawn out correctly on the map, and the published procedure should be referenced. Also, just to note that I have the departure procedure overlaid directly on the map in this case. And so any departures or arrivals or approaches that are drawn to scale, they can be overlaid right on the map. And if you don't see that option, it's likely that departure or that arrival is not drawn to scale. Also, I'm using the Jepson procedures because that's what I'm familiar with. That's what I've flown the most hours with and I'm comfortable with. But Nav Canada procedures are great as well. So I really just encourage you to use whatever procedures you're used to and familiar with. All right, so say we've taken off and we're flying our departure now. And Toronto Tower is going to contact us, Lima Romeo Quebec. Now you're cleared direct DAVC, maintain 2,000 feet. So here we are, we're headed towards MDOS. We're now cleared to DAVC. And we can tap DAVC in ForeFlight and select direct to that waypoint. You can also tap the waypoint bubble in the flight plan view if you have that visible and select direct to the waypoint that way as well. So you can tap it on the map, you can tap it in the flight plan view as well. So here's an example of how that would look. Tap on the waypoint, select the direct to, ForeFlight draws the direct to line to DAVC. You're gonna turn in that direction. All right, so now we've done our departure out of Toronto and followed the instructions and climbed to 9,000 feet and we're cruising towards Ottawa. Next thing we want to start thinking about is our arrival. And so we start by getting the ATIS at Ottawa. So Let's say that Ottawa ATIS is Ottawa Information Charlie at 1700 Zulu, winds 290 at 7, visibility 2 miles, light snow, overcast 500, temperature -7, dew point -10, altimeter 2994, landing and departing runway 25 and 33. On initial contact, advise you have information Charlie. So now that we have the ATIS, there's a number of considerations that we want to take into account for the arrival and for the approach. And one of the first things is the approach ban. So this is something that's related to very low visibility kind of operations where you may not be able to complete the approach, but it's something we need to consider. And the approach ban says that pilots are prohibited from completing an approach past the final approach fix if the RVR values are below the specified minima. And those minimas are listed in the CapGen, so I have that there open on the documents page in ForeFlight. So this applies to non-precision, APV, or Cat 1, so standard Cat 1 precision approaches. And it's 1200 for RVR-A. It's mostly 1200. RVR-B can be 600 if RVR-A is 12, but we'll say it's 1200. So that's the minimum to continue the approach past the FAF. Now, there are quite a few exceptions to this rule as well, so let's go through those. So if you're already past the FAF, then you can continue. If it's a training flight, again, you can continue. If RVR is fluctuating above and below minima, that's an exception. If ground visibility is a quarter mile, you can continue with the approach, or if you're on a Cat 3 approach. And if you're on a Cat 3 approach, I'm impressed. You must have some nice aircraft and equipment. But those are all exceptions to that rule. Now let's look at an example. So if the Ottawa ATIS says that runway 32 RVR is 1100, then you cannot continue the approach past the final approach fix. Of course, unless you meet any of those exceptions. All right, so next consideration is the temperature that's listed in the ATIS less than or equal to 0 degrees Celsius. If so, then you need to apply temperature compensation. So published minimum IFR altitudes must be adjusted whenever the ambient temperature on the surface is lower than ISA. So as a general rule, this is considered to be 0 degrees Celsius. Temperature compensation should be applied to your decision altitudes, so your minimums, minimum sector altitudes, your terminal arrival area altitudes, minimum descent altitudes, and your missed approach altitudes. All need to be temperature compensated. And you can see there that the CapGen has a whole section on cold temperature corrections that you can reference in a table. So you can take a closer look at that on the documents page via the Nav Canada drive. All right, so next is just briefing the arrival, the approach, and the airport diagrams. You want to go through all of those things, whether you're flying single pilot or multi-crew. You want to review and brief the planned arrival, approach, and all the related information. All right, next, star restrictions. So the arrival, you'll see, has some restrictions. So as we're flying along here, so you're flying at 9,000 feet, but CANIC requires at or above flight level 230, and Lanark requires at or above 16,000 for runways 14, 25, and 32. So are you violating the restrictions on the star? No, you're not, right? These restrictions, they don't apply to you as you filed a cruising altitude at 9,000 feet. All right, so let's continue down the arrival and take a look at the waypoint DEMCO. So it says max 210 knots at 5,000 feet. So do you have to cross DEMCO at 5,000? Is that a requirement? I'll just give a second. Everybody can scream yes or no at their screen. What do you think? All right, so if you said no, that's correct. So no, the 5,000 foot requirement for DEMCOs is not required if you're planning the ILS or the RNAV Zulu for 3.2. In this case, we're planning the RNAV for 3.2, and so that's listed in the notes. Don't forget to check that. But you caught that in the briefing though, right? All right, so you're continuing en route here past Canuck, and ATC contacts you. Lima Romeo, Quebec, please advise when you're ready to copy hold clearance. So you say, we're ready to copy, and ATC replies, Lima Romeo, Quebec, you are cleared to hold at Lanark as published, maintain 9,000 feet, expect further clearance at 1720 Zulu. So you're gonna copy that down, read it back to ATC, and then you're going to get ready to set up for the hold at Lanark. So you can do that quite easily and efficiently in ForeFlight. Tap on Lanark, then tap hold, set up as published, and add to route. And ForeFlight will add that hold right into your route there. All right, and then you're all set to go. If anyone has questions on the hold advisor and wants to see, just find out more about it, see it in more detail, there's a great section in the ForeFlight Pilot's Guide, which you can get on the documents page in ForeFlight that goes over all the features of the hold advisor. So I recommend taking a look at that. But this just shows how quickly you can enter a hold in ForeFlight and kind of be ready to go. So holds entered, you can do your T-safe briefing. So your type of entry, speed, altitude, fuel, spec for the clearance time, and enter the hold. All right, so you've completed the hold, you've been cleared, you continue along the arrival here, and now ATC contacts you, Lima Romeo, Quebec, you're cleared for the RNAV Zulu runway 32 via VOLAG, contact Ottawa Tower at 118.8. So you're now cleared for the approach. This is when I would activate the approach. I would load the approach routing into ForeFlight. So that can be done via the procedure advisor, tapping procedure approach, selecting RNAV Zulu 32, and selecting your via VOLAG in this case, the T-fix and your minimum. So if you have avionics that supports an LPV minimum, you can select that and add it to your route. This is showing how I would add that approach, and there it is via VOLAG with LPV minimums. Add that to my route, and then I'm all set to go. There's that DIT key point in this arrival, so I'm going to tap hold that and hit delete, and then that cleans up the approach. Interestingly, we have to do the exact same thing in the FMS in the airliner because it's an open arrival. So it means that if you don't get cleared for the approach, you would continue past VOLAG and continue on that heading. But once you're cleared for the approach, you can continue VOLAG, Texan, and continue. So just like in the big fancy FMS, we remove that waypoint. You can do that in ForeFlight by tap holding on that point and tapping delete. You can also tap the waypoint bubble in the FPL menu at the top of the screen and remove it to square off that approach procedure so it's correct. So we're all ready and we'll continue the approach. You can see the nice little altitude bubbles that show the waypoint name and the altitude. So just good for reference. All right, so here we are.
3 mile final, runway 32.
Here we are flying the on final, and you can use the alerts. So 3 mile final or 500 feet, or just as extra reference as you're flying the approach. And again, it depends on your preference. You can use something like this where you've got the synthetic vision view with the approach procedure underneath, or you can just have the approach procedure up. Whatever is your preference. Here's the 500.
500.
All right. Same as in an airline aircraft. It's just more situational awareness as you're on an approach to get these alerts. You can turn these on or off depending on what you prefer in the settings. So more settings, and there's the alert section, and you can see all the different alerts that you can toggle on or off there. All right. So after landing, the taxiway diagram is going to automatically pop up. If you have that setting selected, you can also have the setting where the inset taxi diagram, this is the taxiway diagram that is part of the aeronautical map. And I actually prefer this one. It's a nice diagram. It's the one, if you zoom in on any airport when you have the aeronautical map selected, you're going to actually see this inset taxiway diagram is going to come into view. And if you have your settings selected to have the taxiway diagram on the map display automatically on landing, it will display like this with the inset taxi diagram on the map. All right, so we completed our IFR flight successfully, and we're safely in Ottawa. So let's take a look at some post-flight items that you might want to take a look at after the flight. So I'm going to start by taking a look at my track log review. So I recorded a track log of my flight from Toronto City to Ottawa, and now all the information's here, from my altitude to my speed, the route I took, and this is just a great way to debrief the flight and take a look at what happened. Maybe ATC gave you an interesting vector. Maybe you want to see how straight that approach was, or that turn to final was. You can do this by reviewing your track log. So it's a great tool. You can also tap on the 3D button, and that'll give you a 3D replay of your flight. So here's an example of my departure out of Toronto. So you can see that off 26 left turn, to MDOS, then Toronto cleared us onto to Davsy, and it's nice to be able to play. You can play that through and zoom in and really dig into the flight. It's nice to look back and reminisce on certain flights as well. Using the 3D feature is really handy. All right, so the track log also created a draft logbook entry. And because I have that set up in my settings and in logbook settings, the track logs will create draft logbook entries. So this is great because it automatically creates my logbook entry. I may have to add the aircraft, or I may need to add a note to the route, or make sure that the hours are exactly correct, and that's fine. This is just a draft entry. But it's put a lot of the information already together for me, which is really nice. And I go through it, I make a few little adjustments, and I tap the approve button, and then that adds that into my main logbook as a logbook entry. All right, so we've completed the flight and looked at some post-flight, and I'm just going to give you a couple more key tools that you may that could be useful for IFR flying. So the first one is radial and distance. So ForeFlight allows you to enter a radial and distance from any waypoint. So if you don't know this already, you can enter a waypoint or a VOR, and then you add a slash, you enter the radial, and you add a slash, and you enter the distance. So great way to plot out radial distance from anything, any waypoint, any nav aid, or any airport. You can also take this a step further, and ForeFlight can plot a waypoint intersection. So, for example, we've got our waypoint Alpha and our waypoint Bravo. And so I can specify, so Alpha 080 radial to intersect Bravo at 020 radial. So ForeFlight will automatically calculate that point where those two radials meet. So this again could be useful for setting up a specific IFR route that you want to fly, or to maybe you've got a departure procedure that's you can't load via the procedure advisor. Maybe it's not digitally coded, so you can't load that departure via the procedure advisor. Well, you can create it here based on the actual published procedure using these waypoint intersections or radials and distances, and then save it as a favorite route so you can recall it again. And that wraps up the webinar for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get into some Q&A here in just a minute, but if any questions don't get answered today, the ForeFlight support team is on frequency 7 days a week. Please send an email, team@foreflight.com. It's real people, real pilots, and we're here and happy to help with any questions that you might have. And yeah, thanks again for joining. Fly safe, and let's get into some Q&A.
All right, thanks, Adrian. We're going to go ahead and start with the questions now. Number one, for icing and turbulence, should we use the US or the global layers?
Yeah, thanks, Sam, and thanks everybody again just for tuning in. Yeah, that's a great question because you'll see that there's an option to select either global for the icing or turbulence layer or US, and the answer is in a lot of Canada you can use both if you'd like. The US icing or turbulence layer covers a good portion of southern Canada, but global will obviously cover everything globally and farther north in Canada. So it's you can see what works for you. You can compare. I use global because I know that it's going to cover all of Canada. So that's my go-to, is to use the global layer for icing and turbulence.
Awesome, yeah, and it's always worth just checking both of them if the US layer does cover all of your planned flight path, because they do come from different sources of data, and so neither one is necessarily more or less accurate, but they usually are a bit different, so can kind of help to in terms of confirming whether those predictions line up with each other, if it's available for where you're flying, of course. Here's a question that just came in. Can you show how you got the settings area where you can select to have the taxiway show upon landing? I can go ahead and answer that. We can't show it directly on the iPad at this point, but I can tell you that you can just go to More and Settings, just the regular settings view where you can access most of the settings. And once there's a great search bar at the very top of that view where you can start typing something in, and it will filter all of the settings to only those that match what you typed in. So if you just start typing, what's the term for that one? You could type taxiways, I guess. I believe it's under, you can also just scroll down the settings view and find it further down there. Do you remember what the name of that setting is, Adrian?
Yeah, just bring it up here. Show taxi on map, I believe it is.
Oh yeah, show taxi on map. Okay. Well, yeah, that's the one that'll show it. It'll overlay the plate on the maps view. And I guess the other setting there would be show taxi on landing. And so that one allows you to, it'll show the plate in the plates view rather than overlaid on the map.
Yeah, exactly. So the auto show taxi slider setting will show the taxi diagram on the plates page, and then the show taxi on map will show it directly on the map. Yep.
Perfect. All right, so the next question here, is there any way to get data in ForeFlight when connected to Sentry in Canada and not in range of ADS-B ground towers? Now, important clarification here, because I was confused about this at first when I saw this question. Consider the difference between ADS-B data versus internet data in your answer.
Yeah, that was going to be my first thought. So is this, in terms of data, do you mean data like internet, an internet data, or do you mean ADS-B data, which is different? If you're flying in the US with a Sentry and ADS-B receiver, you can receive ADS-B data, which can be weather or traffic information from ADS-B towers that are ground-based towers in the US. But in Canada, we do not have a ground-based ADS-B tower network, so you can't receive the same, you can't receive weather information with a Sentry in Canada. You can't receive ground-based traffic information in Canada, but you can receive some direct broadcast traffic if you're flying in Canada with the Sentry. So the short form is, if it's internet data, you're not going to receive any internet from a Sentry in any country. In terms of ADS-B data in Canada, you'll receive some traffic information from direct broadcast, other aircraft that are broadcasting their traffic information directly. You also have, in terms of data, I guess you could say, the attitude, heading, and reference system data comes from Sentry. So some Canadian pilots might use a Sentry so that they can see their AHRs, the attitude, heading, reference information in the synthetic vision view within ForeFlight. So that's data you could receive in any country with a Sentry, as well as GPS data comes from Sentry, and you can receive that in Canada. So I hope that answers that one.
Awesome, thanks. Next question, do parallel runways qualify as separate runways, such as 24 right and 24 left? And then the follow-up is, what about runways which are in cross?
Yeah, this is a great question, and actually not one I've thought about for a while. But as far as I'm aware, parallel runways, for sure, they will qualify as separate runways. So you could use that as two separate suitable runways. Cross runways as well, they should qualify as separate runways. I've never heard, in my experience, in my flying time so far, that that cross runways would not qualify. So as far as I'm aware, yes, both parallel and crossing runways would qualify as two separate runways.
All right, next up, what if we depart from Canada, but we're landing in the US? Are both agencies receiving the filed flight plan?
Yeah, good question. So yes, with the cross-border flight plans, when they're filed in ForeFlight, they get sent to both agencies, both Canada and the US. And again, just a plug to take a look at Dominic's webinar that was that's titled Filing Flight Plans in ForeFlight, and that's available online. It really goes into detail on VFR and IFR and even Y and Z flight plans filed in ForeFlight and all the kind of intricacies there. So take a look at that for a lot more information on filing flight plans in ForeFlight.
All right, just a couple more questions here. Which of these features are exclusive to ForeFlight Pro?
Yeah, for sure. I tried to kind of go through that or mention that as much as I could, as I went through it, because I know it can be kind of confusing which ones and which subscription. Just to kind of recap, so forecasted weather in the profile view and 3D view, those features, they're available with Performance Plus. So all the 3D features are included with ForeFlight Performance Plus subscriptions, and then that also includes the forecast weather within the profile view. What else we got here? Profile, the turbulence and the cloud forecast layers, they're available with Pro Plus. So those are like the layers that you can overlay on the map. They're with Pro Plus. I think pretty much all the other features, they're available in all ForeFlight subscription plans. And I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I covered that was available in a specific plan. But if you're unsure, you can also go to the ForeFlight website, so foreflight.com, and then if you go to the buy page, it lists the different subscriptions, and then underneath you can even show a table of what features are in each subscription, so you can kind of compare there. If I missed anything or I didn't answer that, you can take a look there, or if you have any specific questions on a feature, just email us at team@ForeFlight, and we'll be able to provide you with more information on what subscription it's available in, or possibly provide a trial so you can try a different subscription.
Awesome. And the last question is, when do you expect this webinar will be available to view? The answer to that is tomorrow. As you can see on the screen, if you just go to foreflight.com/webinars, you can view this webinar starting tomorrow, as well as all of the other webinars we've done over the past several years. So definitely check it out if you want to watch this webinar again, or if you want to share it with friends who you think would benefit from it. Go check it out there, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ForeFlight. All of them go there as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for showing up, and hopefully you learned some useful information about IFR flight plans in Canada and weather in Canada. I do still see that there are a number of questions that haven't been answered. We can't get to those at this point, unfortunately, but please email them to team@foreflight.com. I can guarantee you'll get an answer if you do that. And we certainly want to make sure that you get an answer to your question. So do that if you want those questions answered. As you can see on the screen, again, check out the pilot's guide in ForeFlight Mobile. You can go to foreflight.com/releases to see all of our app releases. We actually just had a new app release just this morning. So feel free to go check that out and update your app from the App Store. And with that, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adrian, for the great webinar. And we'll see you all on the next one. Bye-bye.
See ya.